How we doing, friends? Welcome to church. So good to be here with you guys today. Man, the best week of the summer is next week. Let's give it up for Camp X next week, kicking off. Over 900 kids gonna be on this campus, so if this room smells a little weird next Sunday, just know it's because we love the next generation and they need the gospel too, in Jesus' name. But hey, this is one of the biggest outreaches of our year. It's one of the biggest weeks of our year. So many, literally hundreds of families bring their kids to our church because it's summertime and school's out and they don't want to deal with them, praise Jesus, and we capitalize on that, okay? To share the hope of the gospel with these kids and with these families who may not come to church otherwise. In fact, many of whom do not come to church otherwise. So this is one of the biggest outreaches of our year. And I just want to take this moment, not just to celebrate Camp X and Youth X, which is coming up, but also to talk for a second about generosity. The importance and the power of generosity. And there's this amazing verse from the life of David. As we've been studying the life of David, one of the things I love about him is how generous David was. And I want you to hear David's heart of generosity in this verse, okay? Here's what it says in 1 Chronicles chapter 29. It says this, "Now our God," this is David saying, "Now our God, to you, Yahweh, we give you thanks." Thank you, God. That's what he says. "And praise your glorious name. But who am I? And who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this?" Who are we that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. We've only given back to you what was already yours, what you gave to us. What a privilege, what an honor to give generously. He says, "Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you." And I love that verse. I love David's heart behind giving and generosity. He says, "Lord, this is a privilege. I get to be a steward of what you've already given me." And friends, I just want to tell you this. We are building a house here. We're building a house for the next generation to hear the gospel. We're building a house every Sunday, and the house is not a building, it's a people. It's hundreds of volunteers who are showing up to pour into the kids of this community. So every time you give, and giving, it's not just tipping God, it's worship. Tithing is an act of worship. It's a regular act saying to God, "Lord, I want to be a part of building your house. I just want to give back to you what you've already given to me, and I want to do it with a heart of joy and gratitude because you've given me an opportunity to fund the mission of your kingdom here at Rolling Hills Church." And so as we head into summer, I know as many of you head on vacations and summertime gets crazy, I want to encourage you, maybe you've never given before, to sign up for automatic monthly giving. We automatically give to the things that are most important to us, the things that are a priority to us, like our house payment, our car payment, our cell phone payment. Why would we not sign up to automatically give to the work of God and building his house here through the next generation and through everything that we're doing as a church, amen? So take an opportunity, pray about it, and let's jump in with generosity as we head into the summer. Okay, today, part 4, this is part 4 it's part 4 of the life of David. And man, anybody, I've been into this series, it's kind of been wrecking me a little bit. Anybody else just into the life of David right now and understanding? Maybe not, okay, crickets. I'll switch series real fast. I didn't really give you all a chance to respond, but I have been loving this because it's just so real. It's so honest. And the life of David, it just truly captures the wider range of human emotions that we all go through, that all of us experience. David is just, it's all out there for the world to see, and I love it because we understand that, man, David is human, that you're human, that I'm human. We all go through similar experiences in life, and we can all discover what it looks like to find freedom, to find joy, to find Christ in the midst of our journey. And so today we're moving on in our story. Last week we looked at the story of David and Goliath. If you missed it, go back and check it out. It was called Your Battle Belongs to the Lord. And we looked at our need for a Savior. We understood the fact that, hey, we're not strong enough to defeat the greatest Goliaths in our life. We need a champion, a Savior. And so this week we're moving on to chapters 18, 19, and 20. And we're gonna look at the relationship between three men. We're gonna look at the relationship between these three men. Saul, the reigning king, who God has dethroned, taken the kingdom away from. David, the future king, the young boy who's been anointed as the future king of Israel. And Saul's son, Jonathan, the heir to the throne. Woo-wee. We got some spicy drama right here, right? The relationship between three men who have a rightful claim to the most powerful seat in Israel. The guy who's on the throne, the guy who God has called to be on the throne, and the heir to the throne. And how these three men relate to one another is such a picture. It's such a picture of reality for our own lives. It ends up being a picture of the gospel. But what we end up seeing coming out in this relationship specifically is one very clear emotion, one very clear experience, one very clear feeling that all of us can relate to, and it runs the thread of their entire story. And it's something we've all felt before. It's something that is actually very toxic to our souls. If we don't take it seriously, it can take us out. And it runs the thread of the story of these three men, and it's one word. It's a simple idea of jealousy. Jealousy. Something we've all felt, something we've all experienced before. And my title today, if you're taking notes, is this: the comparison trap. The toxic nature of jealousy and how to find freedom from an envious heart. Let's go. Let's jump in. We're all here. We're all in it together. Nobody is exempt from this. We're all in it together. We all deal with comparison, envy, and jealousy. And jealousy, friends, if jealousy were a smoothie, I'm just going to say it. I love smoothies in the morning, okay? If jealousy were a smoothie, there are a lot of ingredients that make up the jealousy smoothie. This is what jealousy is. I'm going to use these words interchangeably, and we see this from the story of Saul and Jonathan and David. Jealousy is made up of comparison. We all know that. Easy to feel jealous of people that we compare ourselves to who are doing better than us in life, or who we perceive to be doing better than us in life. It's made up of fear. It's made up of anger. Oh, I don't like it when they're doing better than me. I'm jealous of them. It's made up of self-hatred. God, I wish I was more like them. I'm jealous of them. It's made up of obsession. What are they up to? What's going on? Hey, where'd they go on vacation? Did he get that promotion? Oh, she married him. Jealousy, right? Resentment. I just can't stand that they're doing so well. Jealous of that, right? Envy, I want what they have. Coveting, I want what they have. Different words for the same thing. Inadequacy, insecurity, I'm just not as good as them. I wish I was more like them. Hatred, oh, I can't stand that person. Disgust. We see all of these emotions wrapped up in a jealousy smoothie in the life of Saul. And all of these are things that we can compare to that we've experienced. And I'll give you just some more. Like, we've all experienced jealousy. We've felt the pull of envy. We've felt the temptation to compare our lives, our bodies, our personalities, or our possessions to someone else's stuff. We know what it feels like to covet, to want something that someone else has. I'll give you a funny little illustration. Over this past year, over 2020, if you go out the back entrance of our neighborhood, somebody, I don't know who it was, but they bought this massive plot of land right out the back entrance of our neighborhood. Beautiful plot of land. It was like a horse farm. And tucked back on maybe 20 acres, you could see the foundation of this house going in. It's gonna be a huge house. And so everybody in the neighborhood, every single day that we're like coming out of the back entrance of the neighborhood, we're like, how far along is the house coming? You know, we're just checking in on the status of the house, right? And as this thing was put together over months and over the course of the year, kind of during COVID, when we're all looking around anyways, it literally ended up looking like a page from Magnolia Market, Chip and Joanna Gaines just plucked out of a magazine and just stuck perfectly on this little 10-acre California ranch. And I remember my neighbor, he captured it so perfectly. One day he drove by and he took a photo at sunset of this house, okay? And he posted it on his social media feed. A little awkward. And he said what everybody in our neighborhood was thinking. He just said, I really like my house, but I like this one better. And I thought, that's a hilarious joke. His feed just blew up. Everybody was like, me too. I thought the same thing the whole time I was watching it go up. I want that shiplap. I want that pool. I want that yard. I want all that stuff. And this is a funny little illustration, but it's true. And jealousy doesn't just take the form of Instagram or social media or comparison in our lives. Jealousy has a dark side too. And jealousy, comparison, and envy, it begins as something we have, that we feel, an emotion that we experience, but they grow into something that has us. Begins as something we have, but it grows into something that has us. And the truth is, they go much deeper and they get much darker for all of us. Have you ever wanted someone to fail before? Deep in your heart, someone got the promotion that you wanted. Someone made partner and it was yours to make. The job you wanted, the husband you wanted, the wife you wanted, the family, the kids, the recognition. And genuinely deep down, some part of you said, I want them to fail. I don't want them to make it. I want them to fail. I want something to go wrong for them. Have you ever felt inadequate and insecure because of someone else's success? Have you ever compared your life to somebody else's life and felt like a failure? Friends, deep down, that's just jealousy, disguising itself as a feeling of failure. Welcome to humanity. We all have. And here's the danger: jealousy, comparison, envy. If we don't sever the roots of these things in our hearts, they always lead to self-sabotage and broken relationships. They always will lead. Jealousy always leads to self-sabotage. It doesn't actually hurt the person you're jealous of, it hurts you. And it breaks relationships. How many friendships have been destroyed by jealousy? How many families torn apart? How many marriages failed? How many wars have been started over jealousy and pride? How many bad financial decisions have we made just trying to keep up with the Joneses through comparison? How many careers have been derailed? How many sleepless nights have you experienced because of envy or comparison? And we live in a day, I mentioned this a second ago, but we live in a day where jealousy and comparison and envy is more available to us than ever before. Than ever before. It is literally at our fingertips. For the first time in human history, you can compare your life to anybody in the world. An old high school friend, a colleague, a neighbor, an influencer, a celebrity. You can just sit there and say, how do I measure up? How am I doing? Have I arrived? And we just fought, the culture we live in is a breeding ground for jealousy and comparison. And in this story today, we're gonna see what happens to Saul as he gives in to jealousy. We're gonna see the ever deepening pit that Saul ends up finding himself in because he doesn't deal with his jealousy. The story for us starts today in 1 Samuel 18, verse 6 to 9. Here's what it says. 1 Samuel 18, verse 6 to 9. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistines. So David has just defeated Goliath. miraculous victory. He saved the nation of Israel from going back into slavery, from being enslaved by the Philistines. The army is coming home. Women, it says, from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They came out to greet Saul, the king. And they sang and they danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. So what's happening here? There's a celebration, there's a party. Israel won. David, against all odds, defeated the giant. The army routed the Philistines. And so this is a very human thing to do. Whenever anybody wins or a big victory is celebrated, people come out, they gather, they throw a parade, they sing songs. I mean, just look at what happened in Tampa Bay after Tom Brady won the Super Bowl. I was watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan recently, and I remember the entire city of Chicago. After they won their 6th championship, the whole city came out and gathered and celebrated the Chicago Bulls. It's a human thing, it's what we do, and that's what's happening right here. Saul is the king, he's at the head of the procession, he's in the limousine waving at everybody. We won, we made it, right? He's waiting for his interview. People are lining the streets in Gibeah. The women, they came out to meet King Saul. They sang and they danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. And then a song emerges from the crowd, specifically from the women. And it goes something like this. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul has killed his thousands. Saul's pretty good. David is 10 times better. Imagine this scene. Saul waving to the people. He's at the head of the procession, the victorious king. This is the biggest victory he has won as king. This is his greatest accomplishment. His army as king defeated the Philistines in a full-on rout. They destroyed them. And even though he didn't step up to the challenge, even though he failed in his responsibility as king, this was still his moment. It was still his army. Israel was still his nation. But the people knew the story. They knew what David had done, and the legend of David was growing. And they sang a song that honored Saul. He's killed thousands. He's a good warrior. Not many people can say that. He's won some victories, but David, 10 times better. 10 times better than Saul. Like, Saul's awesome, but David is the hero. And here is where we begin to see the anatomy of jealousy and the trap of comparison. Here's where it begins to destroy Saul. Look at this. The very first thing that Saul experiences in verse 8, his response to the song. Listen to this verse. This made Saul very angry. He didn't like that song. Made him angry. What's this, he said. They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. Next, they'll be making him their king. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. The very first thing in Saul's jealousy smoothie is anger. Anger. Jealousy can begin as anger and resentment at the success of others. Saul should have been praising David. He should have been thanking David. He should have been saying, way to go, David. You saved the day. A good leader always elevates the success of those under him. A good leader always says, you're the man, you won the battle for all of us. Sure, I was king, but I was scared, and you had the courage to face up, and God was on your side, and we won. We won. But that's not what Saul did. He got angry. They should be singing about me. He's taken my glory. He's taken my song. I'm the head of this procession. I'm the king. Who does he think he is? Anger begins to raise its head. Jealousy takes on the form of anger for Saul. He resented David's success because he wanted David's praise. That was good, preacher. Probably say that one again. Okay, I will real quick. That one pretty much like put me on my knees in my office today. He resented David's success because he wanted David's praise. Oh God, get rid of the desire for praise from my soul. Lord, get rid of the desire to be the center of attention from my soul, from all of our souls. Resentment. He resented David's success because he wanted David's praise. We've all felt this before. I'll never forget. My first few years of marriage, married to my amazing wife who stuck with me. I'm in seminary, okay? So we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and we're starting a family. We lived in Nicholasville, Kentucky, Nick Vegas, baby. Amazing place to live. I'm sorry if you're from Kentucky. So, I was like, man, I'm gonna get seminary done, then I'm getting out of here, right? I'm gonna finish my degree and get ready for pastoral ministry. And I don't know, about the second year of our marriage, we had 1 kid at the time, and it was a hard grind. Grad school, I'm working as well. We're just trying to figure it out. We just had a very meager lifestyle at that point in our lives. And no shame on it, it was just where we were at. And I remember one night, long day of studying. Lindsay had a long day, little baby, we're not sleeping at all. We turn on the TV and American Idol is on. And, it's not like one of the people competing for the prize of American Idol. They had a guest musical artist on the show. And they're like, hey, up next is so-and-so. And Lindsay and I lean forward and our mouths drop because it's her ex-boyfriend who had just dropped like the newest multi-platinum song in America and was on his rise to like stardom. And I'm like, sweetheart, get thee behind me, TV, American Idol, this is turn it off. But I couldn't look away, and the song was amazing. And what do you think I was feeling in my heart? Oh, Lord bless him, that guy is crushing it. Man, he is just slaying it. Man, Lord, your anointing is upon him. He is just the man. I was angry. I was like, Lord, I genuinely hope he falls off the stage and dies. Lord, please smite him right now. I was like, no, this is horrible. I'm like, sweetheart, it would be a horrible situation if you were still involved in that. You're here with me in Nicholasville, Kentucky, going through seminary. I resented it. I was so angry. I was so mad. I wanted him to fail. I did not want him to succeed. And he kept dropping amazing songs, and he still is, and I'm not gonna tell you who it is. But it's so funny because jealousy, it hides itself as anger, and then it shifts to this idea of inadequacy, a feeling of shame due to our lack of ability or skills or our lack of praise. I just don't have what it takes. And there was some part of Saul deep down that knew he was supposed to be Israel's champion. He was supposed to be the warrior that won the day. He was supposed to be the guy that showed up and defeated Goliath, and he cowered in fear. He didn't have what it took. And so when David did show up and he did defeat the giant and he led the battle and he won the victory that day for the entire nation, when David did it, there was some sense of Saul that just said, I can't compare with that. Inadequacy, and it is jealousy in the form of inadequacy. I want what he has. I want the praise he's getting. I want the courage he has, but I just don't have what it takes. We've all felt it. We've all experienced it. And the inadequacy, it leads straight to comparison. I mean, how much clearer could the comparison get? David, 10,000. Saul, 1,000. Just right there, right on paper in front of you. This made Saul very angry. What's this? He said they credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. The comparison was just right in front of his face. They're comparing me to David and they're saying he's better. They're comparing me to David and they're saying he's better. Friends, comparison is the soil where the seeds of jealousy grow. Comparison is the soil where the seeds of jealousy grow. Comparison is this: it's an estimation of your value. Your value. Your value and success based on your performance, your position, or praise in relation to the perceived performance of others. You're comparing yourself to others based on your performance, your position, or how much people like you. Friends, do not compare yourself to the assignment and gifting of God on someone else's life. Do not compare yourself to the assignment and gifting of God on someone else's life. God's metrics for success are not your metrics for success. God measures success based on faithfulness, not bank accounts, not followers, not praise. He measures success based on faithfulness. You cannot get wrapped up in the comparison trap. Comparison is a double-headed snake. It bites you in both directions. If you compare yourself to someone and you're like, oh yeah, I'm crushing it, they're not, you end up in pride. If you compare yourself to someone and you're like, God, I wish I was like them, you end up in self-hatred and self-pity and inadequacy. Comparison bites you from both directions, and Saul was drowning in comparison to David. And then it moves on to covetousness. He wanted what David had. And here's what I mean specifically. 1 Samuel 18:12, I think the verse will be up on the side. 1 Samuel 18:12, Saul was then afraid of David, for the Lord was with David and had turned away from Saul. Saul knew that God used to be with him. When Saul was king, the Holy Spirit was with him. When God rejected Saul, the Holy Spirit left Saul and went to David, and Saul could recognize it. He could recognize what was happening. And then in chapter 15, verse 28, it says this: Samuel said to Saul, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one who is better than you. Just laid it out there. Better than you. He took the kingdom, gave it to someone else. Saul coveted what David had. He wanted the kingdom back. Only thing Saul wanted was to be king. His entire identity was wrapped up in his ability to be a good king, and David was he was kingly before he was ever king. And his covetousness caused Saul, don't miss this, friends, stick with me here. It causes him to hold on to something that no longer belongs to him, and he almost burns down the whole kingdom as a result. He almost burned the whole thing down because he wouldn't release what had already been taken away from him. And his covetousness and jealousy put him in direct opposition to God and to God's choice. This is what Saul was into. This is how deep he was in the pit of jealousy. We've already talked about this a little bit, but Saul also had envy. This was the other ingredient in the jealousy smoothie. He actually had pain at the sight of another's good fortune or success. It hurt him to see David succeeding. It was painful for him. David had what he wanted. He said, envy is stirred up by those who have what we ought to have, what we think we ought to have. And all of these are just different words describing jealousy. They're different nuances of what it is to have a jealous heart, to have a heart that is burdened by envy. I love it. When you look up envy on Wikipedia to get the definition, they actually have a painting, like a very famous painting of what envy looks like. That's scary. But you know you've made that face scrolling Instagram at least once this week. Like there's been real pain in your soul at somebody else's success at some point. And friends, there is no quicker way to become miserable and dissatisfied with the blessings in your life than by wanting what someone else has. Woo! There's no quicker way to become miserable and dissatisfied with the blessings in your life than by wanting what other people have. Envy eats us up from the inside out. Saul was envious of what David had. He was envious of David's praise and accolades. He was envious of the fact that people loved David and hated him. He has what I want. Fear. Saul's fear came from his insecurity. He was afraid of David because the people loved him, and he was afraid of losing his kingdom. It says this in chapter 18, verse 15. David had success in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful David was, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all of Israel loved David, for he conquered all their enemies. Saul was jealous, and he was afraid that David was going to take his place. One more, and then we'll move on. Lastly, obsession. And this one hit me at the very end. As I was really thinking through this idea of jealousy, what are the ingredients of jealousy? What does jealousy produce in our lives? It produces obsession. It produced an obsession in Saul's life. It says, from that day forward, he kept a jealous eye on David. He kept looking at David. He was checking in on David's life. He was looking at David's life. And then at the very end of the chapter, verse 29, it says, Saul became David's enemy continually. He became obsessed with David. We become, in some ways, obsessed with those that we want to be like, with those that we are jealous of. Bertrand Russell said this, amazing quote, really unpacks this idea. He says, if you desire glory, you might envy Napoleon, but Napoleon envied Caesar. And Caesar envied Alexander. And Alexander, I dare say, envied Hercules, who did not exist. Envy puts you on a crazy rat race. Comparison puts you on a rat race, a wheel that you can never get to the end of. It's exhausting. It makes you anxious. It causes sleepless nights. It puts you in this trap, a comparison trap that you can't get out of. And we become obsessed with the lives of others. We become obsessed with what others have, and we miss the blessings that God has put right in front of us. For Saul, jealousy and comparison had destroyed Saul's sanity and peace. It distracted Saul from his calling. He was supposed to be leading Israel, but he spent his whole time fighting David. It divided the people of God. The kingdom was divided between Saul and David. How much does jealousy and comparison divide the church? It devoured, in the end, Saul's soul. This is amazing. 1 Samuel 18, verse 11, there's a very confusing verse right here, but I want to unpack it. It says, the very next day, a tormenting spirit from God. What does that mean? Overwhelmed Saul, and he began to rave in his house like a madman. David was playing the harp as he did each day, but Saul had a spear in his hand, and he suddenly hurled it at David, intending to pin him to the wall, but David escaped him twice. What does it mean that it says a tormenting spirit, a disturbing spirit from God? Here's what it's saying. No, I do not believe that God sends demons to torment people. I don't believe that's what it's saying. But here's what I do believe. When Saul rejected God, it says God rejected Saul. God did not reject Saul just because he didn't like him. It says, look, Samuel says, Saul, the kingdom has been taken away from you because you rejected God. If you would have obeyed God and followed God and loved God, you'd still have the kingdom. But because you rejected him, he's rejected you. What did Saul replace with God? The Spirit of God left him. He replaced it with jealousy, a spirit of jealousy. So God says, look, I'm going to give you what you want. I'm not sending a demon into your life, but if you reject me and you want to foster a heart of envy and jealousy for my anointed kid, David, I'm going to give you what you want, Saul, and it's going to drive you crazy. You're going to be like a madman. It says this, he began to rave in his house like a madman. Jealousy, comparison, envy. In the end, it devoured Saul, drove him crazy. Jealousy causes us to sabotage ourselves and God's plan for our lives. And I want to close with this. After a good long look at what jealousy and comparison does, how do we sever the root of this in our life? How do we get out of the rat race of comparison? How do we find contentment in God? We look at the example of Jonathan. Listen to this. 1 Samuel 18, listen to the difference of how Jonathan, the heir to the throne, the one who's gonna be king after his dad passes on Saul. Look at the difference between Jonathan and Saul. Here's what it says, 1 Samuel 18, 1-4. The keys can come out. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing, gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword and his bow and his belt. What just happened here? Jonathan freely gave his royal robe, the crown prince, the heir to the throne, the one guy who had a reason to be jealous, the one guy who had a reason to feel threatened by David, freely gave the kingdom to David. Whoo! Said, I recognize what God's doing on you, and I have more of a desire. I have more of a longing to see God's plan for this nation than I do to see my name be glorified. I want to line up with God. David, you're the one. Take it, take the robe. No one asked Jonathan to give up his right to the throne. Why'd he do it? Because he loved David. He did it by love. He gave up his royal robe. He gave up his crown, his kingly inheritance for love. Anybody see where this is going yet? There was a greater Jonathan about 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years later. I can't remember. Thousands of years later, named Jesus, who gave up a robe of righteousness and took on our sin so that we could become royalty. Listen to what Isaiah 61:10 says. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall exult in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. Jesus stripped himself of royalty. He took your rags, said, here, have my robe. I'm gonna make you a king. I'm gonna make you a queen. I'm gonna invite you into my Father's family. And even though you're a prodigal, and you're dirty and you're on the way home, the Father will still give you a robe and a ring on your finger. He'll call you his own. And friends, if you want to know how to sever the root of jealousy in your life, if you want to know how to cut off envy at the past, how to get rid of comparison, know who you are. Know what you've been given. Understand your identity is not in your possessions or your praise or in your bank account or in anything else. It's in the fact that you are beloved by God, that you've been given a robe of righteousness by Jesus as a free gift. And friends, when that lands on you, here's what happens. When you understand that you're already royalty in God's eyes and you have everything you need, then you will invest your life to make others kings and queens, and you will rejoice when they become all that God has intended for them to be. You will rejoice. You will live a life of blessing others. Take my robe. I already know who I am. I don't need the praise of man. I don't need the accolades of man. I know who I am. I'm not jealous of you. Go for it. Run your race. May God bless you on the way. That's the heart of Jonathan, and that's how we sever the root of envy in our lives. Friends, it starts at the communion table. It starts at the communion table. Maybe some of you in here today, you are eaten up with comparison and envy. Maybe some of you today are in a rat race of obsession. And God says, I want to free you up. At the foot of the cross, I want to show you that you've already made it. You're already fully loved. You are already fully accepted. You're already royalty. There's nothing else the world can add to you because I've given you everything in Christ. And communion represents the greatest gift this world has ever known, the gift of grace and salvation through the death of Christ on the cross. And so we're gonna take communion together, but before we do that, I just want to invite you, if you've never accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you've never accepted the free gift of salvation, do not leave today without that. We will have people ready to pray with you at these prayer walls on both sides who would love to pray with you and walk you through a prayer of putting your faith in Christ. If you have accepted Christ, and let's take communion together and remember that by his stripes you were healed, by his body you were made whole, and you have already been given everything you need in Christ. Amen? Amen. Let's take communion together.